Excellent. Okay. So hi, everyone, and welcome to the January 31st, or potentially if you're in a different time zone, that's another time. But the January 31st edition of the Welcome to the Network, Design Justice Network. This is me. My name's Victoria. I currently am in Bogota, Colombia, which is the territories of the Musica peoples. And I work as the node and working group manager. I live in Toronto normally, and I'm a freelance digital web and graphic designer outside of my work in the network. I have two staff members, Renee Joy, who is our communications specialist, and Taylor Simone, who is our special projects manager. Just me here with you all today, but they are two other lovely people that at some point you may meet in the future. So to get started, why are we hosting this session? A big part of that is because we have received lots of questions, similarly themed questions, and we want to be able to provide better support to both our members, our signatories, people who are new and interested in the network. So that's the main reason, but also as we develop more resources, as we learn new things, especially we've learned a lot from our node and working group organizers, that we want to keep things up to date and allow the ability for people to share feedback and ideas around the work or around what you're most interested in. So the first thing is just design justice. Today, this is going to be a quick overview. I'll do my best to go through as many things as I possibly can. But the book that you see in the image on the screen here called Design Justice is by Sasha Costanza-Chuck, who is one of our steering committee members. And that is a really great overview of the network, of the history, of everything into how and why design justice as a network came to be. So I highly recommend taking a look at it. It's available free online to read, but also you can purchase the book too. And this is just some beautiful pictures of different activities and workshops and things we have for folks to use at our website, designjustice.org, which is where most of our information exists for follow-up for sure today, as well as these slides. So what is design justice? It is a framework of analysis for how design of the systems that we use, socio-technical systems, images, objects, all the things we use or create or work with every day, influence the distribution of benefits and burdens between various groups of people. I promise I'm going to explain this in further detail shortly. But to give an important framework as to how and why Design Justice Network came about, it's really important that we acknowledge the philosophies, the different people, the organizations who have inspired design justice, who have led the way for design justice, and who continue to do either design justice or other justice-oriented work. This is a short list, as many as can fit on this slide, but names that might not be included, but that are referred to are someone, Kimberly Crenshaw or Patricia Hill Collins, people who talked about Black feminist thought, intersectionality, the matrix of domination. And again, you'll see the link to the Design Justice book at the bottom, because I don't have enough time to go into all of those details, but I would love to answer questions later if we have time about those. But it will give you a lot more background and history if you're interested in learning more. So now I'm just going to talk about why design justice. And I talk about design justice, or we often talk about design justice as a theory, as a way to practice what you do, your work. But how did it come about, or why are we talking about design justice? And I often use the example of design injustice in order to explain what design justice is. And some of you are probably familiar, or this is the first time you're hearing about it, but design processes in a normal design. So if we're talking about designing our telephones, or how the tools we use in the kitchen are created, or just the buildings or the offices that we live and work in, how they're designed, who's involved in that process. The image that you see on the screen, this is a typical, representative of a typical design process. And in that way, what you would see is the people who have the most power, the pink dots that are on the inside of that black circle. They are already at the center of the process of the design of your phone, of the building that you live in. Whereas the others are on the periphery or outside of that circle. They're outside of that process. They have no decision-making power in that process. And that's why when we're talking about design justice, we actually want to talk about centering the people who are normally left out. But how do we do that, or how do we talk about design justice in terms of that distribution? This is a really useful chart that was made many, many years ago now. But the 3 questions that you see are who was involved in the process, who was harmed, and who benefited. And we use that as an example in either design processes that we are a part of or running, or to help others think through their design processes. But basically the question is, how do the distribution of the benefits, whether you benefited from a design process or you were harmed in it, as well as the procedural, the justice of the procedure of the actual design of the thing. So I'm going to use an example to explain in the next, but if we think about the design of the Samsung phone that I use here in my hand, and sorry, you can't see it great, but I have a Samsung phone. If we think about the process of that design, the benefits of the design tend to go towards those who have more power. And in this example, the CEO of Samsung has more power. The designers of the phone, or the people who create the different applications or make decisions around the finance of Samsung, for example, they have tons of power in that process, and they reap more of the benefits of the sales of the Samsung phone, or the people using the different applications that use it. Whereas the people with less power, perhaps the people who are working in the mines to mine the products that go into the battery, that's the part of your phone, or the pieces of the camera that is involved in your phone. I don't know a whole lot about all of those processes, but what I do know is that the people who are building the bits and pieces of your phone, of our phones, are much less involved in any process of designing it, and reap less of the benefits of that design, in which case means they actually experience a lot more harms, which is why in this diagram you see more harms going to those with less power, and less harms going to those with more power. So when we're talking about design justice and using that Samsung phone as an example, you can see now the pink dots and the green dots are on the middle. The green dots are actually at the center, so they're right in the middle of the process, whereas the pink dots are in it, but are not the focus of the design. And so design justice expands that process, so that the knowledge, the experience of the community or the people who the thing is made for is actually centered in making that design. So all of the people who touch or are part of that process are part of the process in actually making decisions in order to make it what design justice is. That's not an easy thing to do. We know and recognize that, and that's a question that we get all the time, but it is about the process and the learning of how to do this and how to improve on our designs. So what I'll talk about next is a little bit about the Design Justice Network, the community, the ways to volunteer, the ways to get involved, what has happened over the years. And that community, the Design Justice Network, has really grown since 2014. It's been getting bigger every year. But again, we're talking about that meaningful participation. And importantly, part of the design justice principles is the recognition of the community-based, Indigenous, diasporic design traditions, knowledge, and practices. The Design Justice Network has been growing, as I mentioned, and many new members have joined and participated over the years. And part of that work was members helping create a mission and a vision and strategic or intentions for the entire network. I'm going to read out the mission, but the others I will leave for reading later. So the mission of Design Justice Network is that we wield our collective power and experiences to bring forth worlds that are safer, more just, more accessible, and more sustainable. We uplift liberatory experiences, practices, and tools, and critically question the role of design and designers. Rooted in a sense of abundance, possibility, and joy, we provide connection, care, and community for design justice practitioners. And this welcome session is part of that, is part of sharing the tools and resources and the different things we have. I'm going to skip over the vision and intentions only so that we have enough time to get through everything else. Please go back and read it if you want. So now just a bit of history of the network. The image you see on screen is actually from the summer of 2015. A group of about 30 designers, artists, community organizers, technologists, people from lots of different sort of backgrounds, experiences, came together as part of this workshop, which we called Generating Shared Principles for Design Justice. And the goal for the workshop was to move beyond the frames of the social impact design or design for good. I'm sure lots of folks have heard that time and time again. And also to challenge designers or the folks in the room to think about how what our good intentions are not necessarily enough to ensure that a process of design or practice of design is becoming a tool for liberation or is involving the people who it should be involving. And so part of that session was to develop those principles that might help us avoid those often unwitting reproduction of those inequalities. And so there, as I mentioned previously, there are a lot of amazing overlapping communities that have done and continue to do this work. And some of those folks were really involved in this process. So that day, that workshop consisted of a lot of brainstorming. We talked about design justice is, and people threw out ideas. And then we talked about how do we do this? We do this by, and as you can see, teaching studios and learning. And I think some of the ideas were dance parties and things. So how do we bring about those things we want to see? And so that was 2015, as I mentioned. And then over the next couple of years, people were interacting with those draft written principles in different ways. There was editing and copy editing, like a normal sort of process. But what also happened is they were shared with different people who both participated in that first session and then in the years after. So the image on screen here is actually 2016, where the group of people on screen, there's probably some not in the picture, but we're again at the Allied Media Conference, and they were taking the principles as they were written, but then started revising them. So what words better represent this idea of justice, of design justice? And that process was in 2016 and also continued over 2017 because a lot of people continued to connect online and edit and work on those principles throughout that time. And then this last image here is in 2018, where a lot of folks that had done that work or new people came in. And this was the year that the principles themselves, as you read them now on the website or may have already signed on to, were launched officially as the 10 Principles of Design Justice. An important note I will say is that the principles are there. There's 10 of them. But the idea behind the principles is that they can and should change as we need them to change. So if one isn't working anymore, how do we change it to make it what we need? Or how do we add more to add the other emerging needs that might come out? I'm quickly noting, I see there's lots of things in the chat and I have not been reading it. So if there is something needed, I'm just putting it out there. I'll check it after. So on screen, these are 3 zines that we have. We actually have 5 or 6 now. One of our working groups produced one last year. And they're freely available on our website to download, to read, or to purchase online if you wish. So that's a little bit of that background. And now I will jump into a little bit of the structure and the different opportunities or availabilities that exist within the network. All of the slides, I should note, have links to all of the things you can read about more, since, as you know, I'm not going into super a lot of detail. But here's on the screen, a picture of our structure. It is a circle intentionally because people can flow in and out as is needed. And what you see is signatories written on the outside of a dotted white line, and then members written on the inside. That's only to indicate that people who sign on to the principles, we call them signatories, and members are very much on the same playing field as everybody here, but members just take either another step in terms of volunteering or giving some kind of donation, either monthly or yearly or one time. And then the circles on the inside, you'll see the steering committee, local nodes, and working groups. So those are folks that are playing some kind of active role within the network, either a facilitator, someone who attends a session. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But members can join and be a part of any of those projects. And lots of people can join if you're not a member or haven't yet signed on to the principles, because the idea is to continue to evolve and make space for that. But in terms of membership, the most important two things you would have to do is, one, sign on to the Design Justice Principles. That's a direct link to them. And then if you wish to join as a member, we have it as a pay what you can fee. I think the least amount is 50 cents up until however much people would like to donate. But in terms of becoming a member right now, you would be able to access the Design Justice Member Slack, which then allows you to network with different movement builders, folks in the network all over the world. The network is international now. So as I mentioned, I'm in Bogota. There's folks in Australia, there's folks in Singapore, a lot of different parts of the world. So I'm sure you've been telling me where you're from in the chat. And you also get access to, for example, leading either a workshop or a session as a member, participating in the sessions that members would run, invitation to our care circles, which we'll have more coming this year. And we're evolving and trying to fine tune and provide more opportunities for our members. One question that people do ask a lot is, like, who else do you work with, or who are other good organizations like you? I've already shown a few of those in the presentation, but these are some really cool, awesome other organizations that we've either worked with or are really aligned, use the principles. So they're good groups to look up if you're interested, but you're actually more specialized in something else. These might be some folks to connect with if you're at all interested. Really quickly, how do our finances work? We get finances from membership fees. We have merchandise and publications that people can either create or purchase. And then we also have a lot of workshops and talks that we're asked to do over time, and people contribute towards those. We also have one-time donations, and something new we are working on are grants, which provide resources in other ways, shapes, and forms, which is great. And another important question people ask a lot are, who are the members of the Design Justice Network? It's really important to point out that the network's main objective is not to get more finances for the network or get more finances for this work. It's the reason we have membership fees is just to help ensure that members are in alignment. So they've signed on to the principles, that they're in community with each other, that it's a safer space for everybody, and that we have care and safety throughout the network. We're still building our capacity to do that, but we also provide the ability for folks to become members by volunteering in different ways. Here are some lovely people that are part of the network who are Design Justice members. And they're folks who have participated in what we call member story sharing sessions. And they share a little bit about what they do in their own work and their own life. and how design justice and the principles intersects with those two things. So when people ask me, how do I use the principles in my life, or what do I do? I often actually refer folks to come and take a look at some of our member stories, because people really range from different types of work. It's not just a designer, like a graphic designer. It's someone who's doing social work, who's doing research, who's working as a city planner, or a disposal person. Design justice can really interact with us in all of our lives in the very ways and processes that we all use. So this is a really good way to take a look at what some folks do in their lives and in their works. And now, finally, I will tell you a little bit about our working groups, our local nodes, and some opportunities to get involved. A working group is, by sort of basic definition, folks who are interested in a similar topic or theme and are using or working with design justice principles on making that theme happen. So currently we have 3 working groups. One is our principals at work, and they work together to share stories, different strategies to help designers, whichever type of designer you are, apply those principles in your professionalized workplace. That's a question that comes up a lot, like, how do I do this when I work for this big company? But also other workplaces and in your lives. And then we also have an instructional designer working group where they use design to move towards the critical instructional design centered around the principles, around teaching and learning about these principles and how do we better integrate that into the curriculums that we're doing. The links there are some more information to learn more about working groups, but also I will note that we're really open to those new ideas. So if tomorrow you decide, hey, I want to have a working group on, I don't know, I can't think of a good example, building construction, and how that intersects with design justice, and I want to do that as a member, as part of this network, you can reach out to us and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. How do I get started? And that's why the network or the staff like myself are here to support that to happen. Our final working group, that exists right now is communications. They are awesome. They're a small team now, but there's tons of space to grow. They work on stuff like our newsletter, and we have a newsletter coming out today, some maybe around the end of this session. So if you're not subscribed, click that button over there and go and subscribe. But also they help us just communicate what's going on in the network. So it could be through member stories, it could be through that newsletter, it could be through redesigning all of the designs that we use on our social media to ensure that they are accessible or meeting the needs of the people that are within the network and that are following us and doing this work. So they do a lot of amazing work that helps support everybody else in terms of what everybody else is doing in the network. And Renee, the communication specialist, is responsible for that. And she's also been running some kind of open sessions for people to get involved in. So definitely take a look at that when the next event or call out is posted. And then we have our local nodes. A lot of times people ask, what does local mean? Like, is local this block of a neighborhood that I live in, or is local the city that I live in, or is local the country that I live in? We encourage people to define that in the way that feels best for them. So in that regard, it means it might be just your local block because you've got a bunch of really cool folks interested in design justice and you want to work on something within the community together. There's a lot of overlap in terms of a local node and a working group, because some of our local nodes are people. There's one, it might have been Ohio, or it could have been another city in the States, but they started one at their university and they focused on one specific project was making sure that women and femme folks had period products or that time of the month products available to them at when they needed them. So it can be from a really small point to a really, really large point. We have a node called the Mediterranean node, which is Italy and Spain and all of the sort of countries surrounding the Mediterranean, but they've connected because there's some commonality. So the idea behind the node is that you have something in common and you're working on it towards together. And that can be defined in the ways that kind of feel best for the folks in it. I missed a point on this slide, but that's okay. So these are a few other ways for volunteering within the network. If none of those things sounded interesting, some other ways people have really supported is doing translations. The design justice principles, I think, are now translated into maybe 18 different languages. There's tons of space to continue to do that. There's tons of space to look at other parts and elements of the network, whether it's our mission and vision statement, and convert those into another language. The more accessible that we can be, especially as an international network, the better. I will note that on the website now there is a Google translation tool, which we know is not the best, but it is helping some people be able to access the information a little bit better than they were before when it was all in English. There's room, of course, to join the communications group that I've already spoken to. There's room if folks are really interested in already, and if you are a member, but you want to talk about how do we evolve and change the membership system or help support members more. And any sort of other ideas, as I mentioned, ways to join a working group or node. I will be wrapping up in the next 2 minutes, I promise, but there's a few more points here about, for example, people often ask, like, what are the impacts of design justice or design justice as a network? And some of those include education and re-education. So changing the way that people are educated to learn design or to incorporate design justice into their work. There's also local nodes and workshops that have been growing all over the world, tons of different projects that have occurred themed around design justice or with that at the center. We've had tons of content creation, from the translations to zines to different designs and elements that people can interact with. And just tons of membership growth and different people, organizations even signing on to the principles. But as within any sort of organic network rooted in important principles and justice, there's always going to be room for growth. And right now, our areas for growth or our points that we know are needing some support is, we know that we're mostly volunteer run. That has been changing over the years because I mentioned I work as a staff contracted. People are distributed geographically, so we try to make sure we can hold sessions like this at various times throughout the day and throughout the month to ensure that folks in, whether it's Australia or Singapore, as well as Toronto, which is where I'm from, all time zones would be able to attend it at some point. And part of that is just recording these sessions to make them accessible to more folks as well. There's always more room for organizing around and activating the principles. Those are some of the most commonly asked questions. And I'm here to support through that, as well as our working groups and our nodes and the other ways in the network. The fact that because this network is still so very new, that we have evolving structures and processes that we're trying to build based on the feedback of the folks that are in it. So we hope that as folks attending today, or as folks already members of the network, that you're interested in joining that in some way. And most finally, I just have one last slide, which gives you really easily become a signatory. That means that you're reading and signing on to the principles. And then if you'd like to join as a member, that's the link with more information on how to do that. I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, which is why now we will move into the question and answer period, and I will stop the recording. Once I remember how to do that. Oh, got it.